The 2019 commencement exercises for George Mason University are now... Oh wait. Only the University Marshal can say those words. Oh well. Welcome to COM 300 module on Ethos. Our objectives are to analyze the key elements of credibility and distinguish between credibility developed within a speech and credibility created before or outside of the speech, and to apply the key elements to particular speakers and situations and identify different ways that credibility is gained or lost. The working vocabulary, of course, will be your responsibility. So what are Aristotle's three elements of ethos? How do these translate to more modern terms? Well, ethos was talked about in those classical times as a person of good sense, a person of good character, a person of good will. Let's identify each of those a little bit more. Good sense we now interpret as someone who is competent, who is experienced, who is intelligent. So if they're talking on a topic, we believe that they have experience on that topic, that they sort of know what they're talking about. We believe that they're quite intelligent, they're sharp, they're handling the information very well. And then we also might judge whether or not they're essentially qualified to talk on a particular topic. Good character is the quality of a person that is trustworthy. Would you trust this person to tell you the truth, or to tell you like it really is? Would you trust this person to be consistent in the way that they approach the world and made decisions? Finally is goodwill. Goodwill usually has to do with sharing values. So you accord me some goodwill, maybe because I believe in some of the same things that you do. Or I've worked hard to advocate for something that you believe in, right? So we share those values. You identify with my value structure, and therefore accord me more ethos. The last element is not in the classical scheme, but we also in modern times talk about charisma. We talk about somewhat hard to define concepts where a person is so magnetic of a personality, is so charismatic that the audience is fascinated by them, right? So there's been a lot of charismatic leaders over the years. A lot of cult leaders have a level of charisma, right, to get their people to follow them. And people like Hitler obviously show charisma in some of their public speaking and so forth. So it's not just a bad thing. We also have really good speakers that are charismatic. Martin Luther King comes to mind, among many others. What are some of the markers then, or characteristics of these elements? When we talk about trustworthiness, what are we talking about? Well, trustworthiness is, are you basically an honest person? Can I trust you to be open and sincere about what you're telling me? Sometimes that's a measure of consistency. Are you telling me the same thing you told the last audience? Or are you changing your story depending on who you're talking to? It often means that you have a history of no deception. If you historically have lied to people or been dishonest, then it's hard to get to be labeled trustworthy. And also there are nonverbals that go along with this, nervousness and eye contact among them, that sometimes are indicators for us of whether or not a person is trustworthy. How does an audience grasp whether a speaker is qualified? Well, there's of course the stated qualifications. You know, I have a BA in communication, an MA in communication, and a PhD in rhetoric and communication. But that wouldn't get me very far teaching a class on rhetoric unless I also displayed knowledge of the topic. I knew the concepts, I knew the vocabulary, and the ideas behind it. So a person will often use the language and the concepts well. Sometimes they will recount, well, I've been teaching for 33 years, right? Or something like that. I've been in the industry for 9 years. And sometimes competence and qualification is accorded by someone else. Maybe someone who introduces us and tries to persuade us that this person is competent and worthy to listen to on this topic. How do speakers provide opportunities for value identification? Well, there are a lot of different ways. One of them is just to say, here's what I've been working. Here's what we did. These are examples of my efforts. So I worked with the homeless. We've got a new shelter going up. We've got less people on the streets, right? And so if you buy into that value, then we're sharing values. I have worked on something or advocated for something that you share. I can also tell you stories of my family to get you to share my values of being a good father, a family man. I could tell you my goals and my vision. So here's what I think a great society should be. And here's where I would take us, right? And so that oftentimes gives you an idea in the future of what my values are for the country or the state or the township or whatever moving forward. And finally, how do we know charisma when we see it? Kind of indefinable, but charisma is when a person has literally a magnetic personality and people just are drawn into their world and they seem fascinated by him, and there doesn't seem to be any particularly logical reason for it. It's about the force of their personality. So look for that as one of the 4 elements. Probably the main issue here is that you not talk about credibility as a whole. I'm not going to accept that. This speaker is credible. I want to know what elements of credibility are there and where are they present in the speech. So you have to break it down in terms of the elements or you won't get full credit from me. Does credibility reside in a speaker, and is it only for individual speakers? The answer to both of these is no. Credibility is in the audience. So I may be the President of the United States, but speaking before an isolated tribe in the outback of Australia, they're not going to give me credibility because I'm wearing a suit and tie. They may not know who I am, right? So really, the credibility resides in the audience. They're the ones that grant credibility. And of course, organizations develop ethos as well. Every time we have a public relations disaster or a crisis communications situation, usually we're talking about a company losing credibility. BP for its oil spill, Chipotle for its outbreaks of foodborne illness. Those kinds of things all impact the credibility of the organization. At the federal level, whenever we have a crisis like a weather event or a major catastrophe, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Association, usually comes under fire for that. So credibility resides, and all the elements of credibility still reside in organizations as well as individuals. Let's talk about initial credibility and terminal credibility, and extrinsic and intrinsic credibility. Well, initial credibility is just what's the credibility of this person before they speak, right? So it's of some interest to us, but not greatly. Terminal credibility is the credibility that they have after the speech. And so that's a little bit more important to us. How did the speech affect their credibility? And extrinsic credibility is credibility that accrues outside of the speech. Extrinsic means outside of. And intrinsic credibility is where the credibility is changed based on the speaking points and the arguments made by the speaker. So we're really focused on sort of terminal credibility and also on intrinsic credibility when we analyze the credibility or the ethos in a speech. What are 5 ways a speaker can enhance ethos? Well, there's lots of ways, but here's 5. First is appearance, how they look. If I wear a tuxedo to a gathering of my friends and family, that's going to be weird. They're going to be looking at me, what? And if I wear a t-shirt and jeans to a black tie event, same deal. So a lot about appearance is context related, and you can lose or gain credibility depending on your appearance in a particular context. Second is language use, and if you speak in sort of guttural tones and use a patois or some kind of an accent, that can really impact the perceived competence or expertise or shared values of the audience. Association and disassociation is the third one. If I associate myself with Abraham Lincoln, an esteemed president in our history, then I've associated myself with a more credible kind of a figure, if the audience believes it. That's also why you see a lot of politicians shaking hands with celebrities to kind of get that associational credibility. Disassociation is, of course, the opposite. If someone is not credible, I will take great pains to disassociate myself from that person in different ways. Fourth is to show a grasp of facts in the material. This is pretty straightforward. If I know what I'm talking about, then I understand the facts of the situation. I can bring in statistics clearly. I can clarify things for you because I grasp the material. Finally, fifth is if I show empathy or identification. So if I talk about the children in the audience, or if I show that I understand your pain, I feel your pain. In some ways that can be a way into sharing values or having the character to admit that I feel that pain as well. In Gilmore's analysis of Jiang's speech, do you agree with his analysis of the ethos elements of intelligence, moral character, and goodwill? Why or why not? That's around page 54. I'm going to leave you to fill that in. Post this. We're going to discuss credible and non-credible people. Give an example of someone you agree lacks credibility. What primary elements do they lack, and why? Give an example of someone that you agree has credibility. Again, what primary elements do they have? So go beyond talking about credibility generally, focus on the specific elements, and it will all work out. I hope to see you all someday at graduation. And in the meantime, have a great day.